Let's get to one big story that came late on Friday. That's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, which agreed to formally introduce a new 15% global minimum corporate tax for companies. Now, the landmark deal was agreed by 136 countries and jurisdictions, and they account for more than 90% of the global GDP, but 4 countries, Nigeria, Pakistan, Kenya, and Sri Lanka, did not sign on the new deal. Now, let's talk about a drill down into the new system. Yomi Olugbenro is a partner and West Africa tax lead at Deloitte Nigeria. Olugbenro joins me live from our studios here in Lagos. Thank you for coming on the show tonight, Yomi.
Good evening, Bosin, and great to be on your show this evening.
Thank you so much for coming through. Drill down into the latest OECD for me. Give me a brief background to it.
Right. You did mention the landmark agreement by the OECD member countries and particularly the G20. It's a landmark development, and it's a response to what has been in the works for many years of intense negotiation and finding how best can we tax the digital player in this new digitalized and global economy. What has persisted prior to now is that many countries have, your standard brick and mortar rules for taxation, which requires that multinational companies will have physical presence in every jurisdiction where they operate. And where they don't have such physical presence, the local countries are not able to bring them to taxation. So there has been this search for the new way of taxing digital players that operate virtually with no physical presence. And that's why many countries, including Nigeria, have thought of digital services tax. You remember the introduction to our Finance Act, where digital player that generate about 25 million naira revenue from the local economy are then made to pay taxes. And this is the same kind of thing that is happening all around the world. So for the multinational companies, this creates an additional pressure on compliance and monitoring and all of that. And so OECD and the G20 economy says, look, rather than allow every country to fashion unilateral ways of taxing digital player, can we come together and agree on a multilateral response to taxing this digital player? So that's what resulted in the agreement that was just recently announced. It's actually a 2-pillar solution. Yeah. One of the pillars is the one you had mentioned, which is the fact that multinational companies that generate, say, a minimum of 750 million euro, $750 million, euro in annual sales, should have a minimum of 15% tax. That's on the one part. But the first pillar actually seek to eliminate the unilateral digital services tax. And what it does is to say, look, we're going to fashion out a multilateral agreement for taxing all of the digital players. So if you're a multinational company with 20 billion dollar, in annual sales, so about 10% or more is expected to be what will be your annual profit. So a percentage of any profit you make over that will then be put together and redistributed to all of the economy where you operate. And in exchange for that, each of those countries will do away with their respective digital services tax. So that's the 2-pillar solution that has just been agreed. So one is the minimum tax, the other is the redistribution of residual profit, as we call it.
These are the big developed economies making tax rules for everyone, including developing economies such as Nigeria, Kenya, and others.
Absolutely. So, but you know what many of the developing economies are saying, particularly the few who are still yet to get on board. Nigeria, like you said, Kenya, Pakistan, Sri Lanka haven't come on board. What they're evaluating is to say, look, we don't have any problem with the minimum tax, which is the second pillar. I think the one that is causing a bit of concern, which is making them to go back to do the arithmetics very well, is the elimination of the unilateral digital services tax. So they know that there are thresholds for participation. And if you look at the operations of many of these multinational companies, even OECD says maybe there will be about top 100 of the multinational companies that will essentially be covered by this. So every jurisdiction is evaluating how does this help us vis-a-vis our prevailing digital services tax that we already have within our country. So that's what is going on so that they can evaluate whether it pays them to come on board or seek further ways of negotiating negotiating and finding ways to really benefit.
Countries like Ireland have been looking at 12.5%, now it's 15%. What are we having in Nigeria? Do you think this is a good deal for developing economies? Should we take it? Is it in our best interest?
Well, theoretically, yes, because it pays to collaborate. There are a lot of other incentive around a very predictable, clear rules of taxation that multinational companies are looking up to for the purpose of directing their investment to any economy. So it's not just, we can't look at it only from the rate of tax alone. So ultimately, when we collaborate, there's a lot more to gain. We can be at the table and negotiate better rules. Maybe the threshold for participation, for example, can be brought down. There's a whole lot of things that can be done. But at the initial outset, what Nigeria seems to be concerned with is that we currently have a digital services tax that bring virtually all digital player into the tax bracket in Nigeria. If we go by this new OECD rule, a number of the digital player within an economy who won't meet up to that threshold may just be going on without getting tax in Nigeria.
In other words, the tax system for digital players in Nigeria, like fintechs and others, will have a lower threshold. The threshold that the OECD is setting is a little bit higher, so Nigeria's dragnet, a few will slip through, which Nigeria does not seem comfortable with.
Absolutely. So Nigeria thinks that if we implement the rule as we currently have it, in the short term, we're likely to make more from this digital player than just the new OECD rule that seems to be focused on when you are really a bigger player. And it's quite typical of the OECD model, where a lot of the developing economies have always had to look through some of these treaties and multilateral agreements to be sure that it's actually advantageous to us and not favoring the headquarter jurisdictions where many of these big, digital players are stronger at.
But again, how do international advisory firms like yourself at Deloitte positioning for this new horizon that has just been signed on?
Well, it's a new world, and as a global player, so we operate in virtually all of the jurisdictions, over 150 countries, for example, for Nigeria. So we do operate in jurisdictions that are already part of the 136 that have signed, part of the G20 economies and all of that, and we also operate in the developing nations where we need to work with both the government authorities in helping them to dimension and break down the rules. Go through the data and shrunk the data to see what will be the kind of requests or demands or clauses that countries need to put at the table to ensure that they get a fair share of the system. But on the other hand, it's also important that we help many of these developing nations to understand and see the bigger picture. So one is not just the rate. There are other areas by which you can drive investment by making sure that the tax rules are more predictable. And so we play on both sides and also help many of these multinational companies to see how to ensure that their compliance burden is minimized and they understand the terrain a lot better and they stay in the grain.
Yes, for Nigeria that is yet to sign on the latest OECD minimum global 15%, how are we going to convince the Buhari or the administration to comply or sign on with the rest of the world, technically speaking?
Well, the understanding we have from the Ministry of Finance is that a lot of conversation is still going on at the back end. Nigeria hasn't, specifically refused or turned it down. What it has said is that it's still studying the new protocol, still trying to negotiate, still trying to have a clearer understanding of, how many of these entities operate within an economy, what is the turnover, and then to see, perhaps before the G20 finance ministers, are officially presented this information and then it becomes...
the deal is done.
Well, the deal is done
last Friday.
But the deal is done, but a lot of conversation still continues for Nigeria.
The big boys have signed on.
Absolutely.
And they've moved on.
And like you said, the countries that have signed represent over 90% of the GDP. So it's always globally speaking. So it's always going to be a challenge for the smaller economies to see how to tackle.
The four countries that are yet to sign on, Nigeria, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, well,
that's correct.
How do I put it very nicely? They don't represent any significant global GDP numbers.
But that's correct, and that's why they like, look, we need to look at our numbers locally, and we just don't have to follow what every other person is saying. So if we implement our local rules, how much more will that fetch us vis-a-vis just signing on to an agreement where we really don't understand the numbers and the impact on us? But I mean, as a professional, I know that beyond just the short-term limitations or disadvantage you may think it may have, there are a lot broader advantage in getting clearer rules in the play, and you can drive in foreign direct investment and make your economy to blossom. And at the end of the day, it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Let's have a forward-looking conversation on this moving forward. Yomi Olugbo, partner and West Africa tax lead at Deloitte Nigeria. We really appreciate your insights. Have a wonderful evening.